$5 trillion. That is not a number thrown around casually. That is the kind of number that reshapes entire markets. And right now, there is a very serious conversation happening at the highest levels of global finance about what happens when that kind of capital starts moving on chain. BlackRock is at the center of that conversation, and XRP may be closer to the middle of it than most people realize. Welcome back to Journey to Crypto. If you are new here, this is the channel where we slow down, cut through the noise, and try to give you the kind of analysis that actually holds up over time. Not hype, not price predictions, not recycled Twitter threads dressed up as research. Real thinking about real developments in a market that moves faster than most people can follow. If that is what you have been looking for, hit subscribe right now and stay with us. Because what we are covering today is one of the most significant institutional storylines developing in the crypto space right now. And if this video gives you something valuable, share it with someone who is paying attention to where this market is heading. Good information in this space is genuinely hard to find, and if you found it here, someone in your circle probably needs it too. Before we go any further, and I mean this because it matters, nothing in this video is financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. I am not a licensed investment professional. Everything you are about to hear is for educational and informational purposes only. BlackRock is one of the most powerful financial institutions on the planet, and the developments we are going to discuss today are real and significant. But significant does not mean guaranteed. Markets are unpredictable. Asset prices move in ways that no analysis can perfectly forecast. The crypto market in particular carries levels of volatility and risk that are unlike almost any other asset class you can participate in. Please, before you make any decision with your capital, speak to a qualified financial professional who understands your personal situation, your income, your risk tolerance, your obligations, your timeline. What I am sharing today is meant to inform your thinking, not direct your money. With that clearly on the table, let's talk about what is actually happening. To understand why the BlackRock story matters so much right now, you have to understand what BlackRock actually is. Because a lot of people hear the name, they know it is big, they know it is important, but they do not fully appreciate the scale of what we are talking about. BlackRock manages approximately $10 trillion in assets. 10 trillion. That makes it the largest asset manager in the world, larger than the GDP of every country on Earth except the United States and China. When BlackRock moves, it does not just move markets. It moves the entire gravitational field around markets. Other institutional investors watch what BlackRock does and use it as a signal for where the serious money is going. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, endowments, insurance companies, they all pay attention when BlackRock makes a directional decision about an asset class. Which is exactly why what BlackRock has been doing in the digital asset space over the last 2 years has been so significant, and why what they appear to be building toward is one of the most consequential developments in the history of crypto. Let's go back to the beginning of BlackRock's crypto journey because context matters here. For years, for most of crypto's existence, BlackRock's CEO Larry Fink was openly skeptical of Bitcoin and digital assets broadly. He called Bitcoin an index of money laundering. He dismissed the asset class as speculative and fringe. And because of who Larry Fink is and what BlackRock represents, that skepticism carried weight. It gave cover to every other major institutional player who wanted to stay on the sideline. If the biggest asset manager in the world was not touching crypto, you had a very easy answer ready when your board asked why you were not touching it either. And then something changed, not gradually, fairly dramatically. In 2023, BlackRock filed for a spot Bitcoin ETF, not a futures-based product, a spot ETF, the real thing, backed by actual Bitcoin held in custody. That filing sent a clear signal to everyone who was paying attention. BlackRock does not file for products it does not intend to win. They have an ETF approval rate that is essentially perfect. When BlackRock files, it is because they have already done the regulatory groundwork, the compliance architecture, and the institutional due diligence to be confident they are going to get a yes. The Bitcoin ETF was approved in January of 2024, and what happened next was extraordinary. The BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, trading under the ticker IBIT, became one of the fastest growing ETFs in the history of the financial industry. It attracted billions of dollars in inflows in a matter of weeks. It validated everything that crypto advocates had been saying for years about institutional demand being real, being large, and being ready to move the moment a compliant regulated vehicle existed for it to flow through. But here's the thing that most people focused on the Bitcoin ETF missed entirely. BlackRock was not just building a Bitcoin product, they were building infrastructure. They were laying the groundwork for something much larger. And the piece of that larger picture that concerns us today is what BlackRock has been quietly building on the blockchain side of their business, specifically around tokenization of real-world assets. Tokenization is the process of taking traditional financial assets, things like treasury bonds, money market funds, private equity, real estate, commodities, and representing them as digital tokens on a blockchain. Instead of holding a bond through a brokerage account that settles in 2 business days and involves multiple intermediaries each taking a cut, you hold a digital token that represents that bond, that settles instantly, that is programmable, and that can move across borders without the friction and cost of the traditional financial plumbing. This is not a theoretical concept. BlackRock has already launched a tokenized money market fund called BWIDL, the BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund, built on the Ethereum blockchain. That fund crossed $100 million in assets within weeks of its launch and has continued to grow. It is a real product, with real institutional investors moving real money through blockchain infrastructure right now. But here's where the story gets very interesting for anyone paying attention to XRP. The BUIDL fund is built on Ethereum, but BlackRock's thinking about tokenization is not limited to Ethereum. They have been explicit in their research and in their public communications that they believe multiple blockchain networks will play roles in the tokenized asset ecosystem. And when you start looking at what qualities a blockchain needs to serve as serious financial infrastructure, speed, cost efficiency, finality, regulatory clarity, institutional relationships, the XRP ledger checks those boxes in ways that very few other networks can match. The XRP ledger settles transactions in 3 to 5 seconds. It handles thousands of transactions per second. Transaction costs are fractions of a cent. It has been running without downtime for over a decade, and it was specifically designed from its original architecture for financial use cases. Not gaming, not NFTs, not decentralized speculation, financial transactions, value transfer, liquidity movement, the exact things that tokenization of real-world assets requires at scale. Now, let me be precise about something because I think precision matters enormously when you are talking about a company like BlackRock and an asset like XRP. BlackRock has not publicly announced a specific XRP or XRP ledger integration. I want to be completely clear about that because this channel does not traffic in speculation dressed up as fact. What exists right now is a constellation of developments. BlackRock's aggressive move into tokenization, the XRP ledger's technical suitability for institutional financial infrastructure, Ripple's existing relationships with financial institutions across the globe, and the resolved legal status of XRP in the United States that, when you look at them together, paint a picture of convergence that serious analysts are taking very seriously. Ripple has also been direct about its ambitions in the tokenization space. They have announced partnerships and initiatives specifically targeting the tokenization of real-world assets on the XRP ledger. They have been building the institutional relationships, the compliance frameworks, and the technical infrastructure to position the XRP ledger as a serious contender for institutional financial activity. And in a world where BlackRock is actively looking for blockchain infrastructure that can handle $5 trillion in tokenized assets, that number representing the scale of assets BlackRock believes will move on-chain over the coming decade, the XRP ledger is in a very short list of networks capable of handling that volume at the speed and cost that institutional finance requires. Let's talk about what $5 trillion on-chain actually means, because I think the number is so large that it loses meaning without some grounding. $5 trillion is larger than the entire current market capitalization of the global crypto market combined. It represents a transfer of an almost incomprehensible amount of value from traditional financial infrastructure onto blockchain networks. And it does not happen all at once. It happens gradually as the infrastructure matures, as the regulatory frameworks solidify, as institutional comfort with the technology grows through direct experience. But here is the important thing about gradual institutional adoption. It tends to front-run itself. The capital that moves early into the infrastructure that ends up winning captures the most significant returns. The investors and the networks that position themselves before the $5 trillion migration is in full swing are the ones that benefit most dramatically from it. That is not a new phenomenon. It is how every major technological infrastructure shift in financial history has played out. The early railroad investors, the early internet infrastructure companies, the early cloud computing platforms, positioning before the mass adoption wave is where the extraordinary value creation happens. We are early in the tokenization wave. BlackRock's BUIDL fund is a proof of concept. The real scale is still ahead, and the blockchain networks that are ready, technically, legally, institutionally, when that scale arrives, are the ones that will define what the financial system looks like for the next generation. I want to zoom out one more time before we close, because I think there is a tendency in this space to get so caught up in the excitement of a story like this that the important caveats get lost. So let me make them clearly. BlackRock moving aggressively into tokenization does not guarantee XRP benefits. Other blockchain networks are competing for this infrastructure role. Ethereum is already ahead in terms of current institutional deployment. Solana is fast and increasingly institutionally credible. There are other networks with serious technical capabilities and institutional backing. This is not a winner-take-all market, and XRP is not the only contender for a seat at the table of institutional blockchain infrastructure. What XRP has, that not every competitor has, is a combination of technical performance, an established decade-long track record of reliability, deep existing relationships with the financial institutions that will be doing the tokenizing, and a now resolved legal status in the most important regulatory jurisdiction in the world. That combination is genuinely distinctive. But distinctive does not mean certain, it means positioned. And positioning is the beginning of the story, not the end of it. The institutions will make their decisions based on performance, compliance, cost, and relationships, not based on which asset has the most passionate retail community or the most compelling YouTube narrative. So watch what they actually do, not just what the speculation says they might do. Follow the actual product launches. Follow the actual partnership announcements. Follow the actual on-chain data showing where institutional volume is moving. That is the signal. Everything else is noise. That is the full picture as I see it today. BlackRock is building towards something that could fundamentally reshape how value moves through the global financial system. The XRP ledger is technically and legally positioned to be part of that infrastructure. The $5 trillion number is not fantasy, it is BlackRock's own projection for where this market is heading. And the window between now and full-scale institutional deployment is the window in which positioning decisions get made. Whether that translates to a specific price outcome for XRP in any specific time frame, I genuinely do not know, and neither does anyone else. But the structural story, the fundamental convergence of technology and institutional intent and regulatory clarity, that story is more compelling right now than it has ever been. If this gave you a clearer picture of what is actually developing in this space, share it. Put it in front of someone who is trying to understand where the serious money is heading and why. And if you are not subscribed yet, join this community, because we are going to keep following this story as it develops with the same level of honesty and detail that we brought to it today. This is Journey to Crypto. Stay informed.